Even in the Martians, perception of the walls seemed to differ. I decided to explore this by asking both sides of the community, the nationalist and the unionist side, of what they thought of the subject.
Anti-nationalists and unionists, or the perception of them. And what I was saying was absolutely up until the wider peace process, and particularly the resolution of the marching issue in terms of the apprentice boys and the Bogside residents in the 90s. Up until that point, the walls would certainly have been seen more from nationalist perspective as a symbol of unionism, both historically because of the plantation and their origins as being constructed as a result of the plantation, and also the fact that the siege, that the walls played such a significant role in the siege in 1689, and then obviously bringing that up to the present, the idea, or bringing it up to the 1990s, shall we say, the idea that the apprentice boys would still have celebrated the siege, walking on the walls, overlooking areas like the Bogside, and just that general impact that those marches would have had on the nationalist population, which again, the walls would all have been seen as part and parcel of that idea that unionism controlled the city, basically. With the resolution of the marching issue, I think it's, if you like, decontaminated a lot of the image of the walls from the nationalist perspective, and with the wider peace process, seeing the removal of the British Army from the streets, and they had a lot of installations on the walls, obviously, security installations, and that whole idea of basically using them for surveillance purposes. They overlooked the Bogside and listen and watch the population there. Once that was all removed, I think people then began to look on the walls in a different light from the nationalist perspective, in terms of the idea that they were unique in terms of the island of Ireland. They're the only intact walled city that's here. And also the fact that they're nice to walk around, just in simple terms like that, but also in terms of tourism, the idea that they could actually be used as a way of bringing tourists into the city to tell part of that story, along with obviously the story down here in the Bogside itself from the more modern political history. So I think certainly the image of the walls has changed from a nationalist perspective because of all of those changes in wider society and the more peaceful environment we have. And in particular, the resolution of the marching issue, meaning that the apprentice boys, who still obviously walk on the walls overlooking the Bogside, but the fact they're not playing the music, the fact that it's not seen to be in the face of the nationalist population as it would have been before, all of that has lended to sort of reducing the image of the walls as a symbol of unionist control as that would have applied in the past. I think from a unionist perspective, obviously dealing with a lot of unionists, not being a unionist myself, but I think there's, and having trained a lot of apprentice boys as tour guides and all the people of unionist background in tour guiding, and having worked with them as well, you can see there's an absolute pride in the walls, and a very, very strong pride in the siege in particular, around the idea that the walls were defended in the way that they were from a unionist perspective, which even from a Republican perspective, and identity, there's a lot to be admired there in terms of that standing up for yourself attitude that applied during the siege, and the fact that they overcame so much problems and so much suffering. So, and you can look at it from outside almost, and look from our perspective, and admire what went on during the siege, and all of those stories now being told through the Apprentice Boys Siege Museum. I think is a very important part of the tourism offering in the city, given that viewpoint, the people, but also reflecting the historical nature of the walls, and even the structure of them, acting as a way of defending the population, but at the same time as an actual, if you like, a prison wall almost during the siege that the people couldn't get out of, which led to so much of the issues they had in terms of starvation and disease. So there's a multi-layered probably approach to the walls from unionism in terms of the symbolic sort of elements around defending the city and defending the Protestantism as well during the siege. The whole symbolism of the plantation and the walls being a bastion of the new settler population.
So the perspective of the unionists on the walls, as you know, it all goes back to the siege and King James's army trying to overtake the city, and the defenders of the city, the apprentices, closing the gates. And over the years, it has always been a sort of bastion for unionists with, as you know, the different things that's on the wall. On the walls, you have the Royal Bastion, You also have what used to be there, Governor Walker's Pillar, and other parts of the walls, and they used to burn Lundy from Walker's Pillar as well on the 18th of December, and that would have drew a big crowd of Unionists too to the walls. And on the 12th and on the 12th of August, the Unionists, the apprentice boys and the Orange would have started off from the walls, and the apprentice boys would have walked around the walls. So it was a sort of bastion for the Unionists, and then up until, maybe I'm going too fast here for you. Up until then, and the trouble started then, and the walls was sort of out of bounds to everybody. They had a heritage company coming from the council who went round the walls, fixing them and bits and pieces, and the walls was in a pretty poor state. And then there was a big renovation to them. Gates was put on during the Troubles, and they were locked at a certain time at night. So it sort of then, with the Unionist population moving to the east bank of the city from the west bank, the 18,000 people that moved, and they weren't as much interest in the walls then from the Unionists who would have lived round about the walls. And also you have the cathedral there on the walls, and you have two Church of Ireland churches, the cathedral and St. Augustine's Church. And the cathedral was one of the first buildings that was built after the siege. So that is how it become a Unionist sort of bastion on the walls.